my name. And next month, we'll be recording it on the church YouTube channel. And we will have a volunteer here to run cameras and AV, and it'll be great. At the moment, I'm going to introduce you to my partner in teaching, and this is a nurse, not just any old nurse. This is Nurse Diane Kent, and yes, she can, but she's also a professor of nursing, so she gets to shape these young minds, and she gets to keep me in line, and it's just a wonderful antagonistic relationship, medical and naturopathic medicine, and you mix them together and it's like Reese's peanut butter cup. Awesome. So this is Diane Kent. She's going to take the first half of this lecture.
All right, how's that? Can you hear me okay? Okay, so I'm going to start us off kind of with the basics of diabetes, and happily, unlike my students, there will be no test for you at the end. So, just to talk about a few statistics in terms of what is the prevalence of diabetes and really what is the cost of diabetes. And there's a few statistics on your notes that start out that in 2021, 38.4 million Americans, or 11.6% of the population, had diabetes. Isn't that amazing? And almost so 29.7 of those were diagnosed, and 8.7 million were out there and didn't even have any idea that they had diabetes. They were undiagnosed. 16.5 million seniors over 65, age 65 are diabetic, and 97.6 million Americans age 18 or older have pre-diabetes. So pre-diabetes is basically, it's an error in carbohydrate metabolism, and basically what happens is it doesn't result in persistent high blood sugar, and then the word that we attach to that is yet. That's the point where diabetes can be avoided, typically with lifestyle changes, weight loss, lifestyle changes, increased exercise. So pre-diabetes is really where you want to find out whether or not you're going to be prone to diabetes so that you can make those changes before it really impacts your health. In terms of what is the cost of diabetes to our society, U.S. deaths in 2023. So I thought it would be best to look at U.S. deaths in 2023 as opposed to U.S. deaths in 2021 because, of course, COVID was such a big player in 2021 and not as much of a big player in 2023. So heart disease is still the biggest killer. And for the past year, it's also still the biggest killer. So 700,000, followed by cancer, 650,000, trauma, so unplanned injuries, 250,000, stroke, 200,000, COPD, which is a chronic lung disease, so your emphysema, chronic bronchitis, that type of thing would be lumped in COPD. 175,000, Alzheimer's disease, 150,000, and right on the trail of that is diabetes with 125,000. So I don't know about you, I scratched my head a little bit on that when I looked at all those statistics because we're going to talk about the complications of diabetes later on down the page a little bit, and some of those complications are things that are our top killers: heart disease, stroke, and a bunch of different cancers. So I'm not sure how they really sorted that out, but I'll bet you anything that diabetes had a hand in a lot more of the health costs and the cost to human life than what was even given credit for in this particular set of statistics. So what is diabetes? Well, people with diabetes mellitus And we have to say diabetes mellitus because, believe it or not, there's another hormone problem that's called diabetes insipidus. So that has nothing to do with blood sugar. So we're going to talk about diabetes mellitus because we're talking today about blood sugar. So DM is how it's typically abbreviated in medical charts and that type of thing. So people with diabetes mellitus have inadequate blood sugar control, and that can lead to serious complications that we'll talk about in a little bit. So there's 3 types of diabetes: type 1, type 2, and gestational. In type 1 diabetes, the pancreas is the organ in your body that produces insulin. Insulin is a hormone that goes around, and basically what it does is it unlocks the door to the cell that allows sugar to get into the cell. Sugar is the primary resource, it's the primary energy source of any of our cells. Okay? So if there's no insulin, even if there's blood sugar in the bloodstream, it cannot get into the cells, and the cells do not have the fuel that they need to run. Okay? That failure of the pancreas often happens because of like autoimmune problems. So we see this a lot of times in kiddos. Type 1 diabetes is typically what we had used before, and is called a juvenile onset. And often it seems to happen after a virus. So that's really where we get the theory that there was exposure to a virus, it got the immune system amped up, and then the immune system attacked the pancreas. It can also happen for other reasons. If people have pretty severe abdominal trauma, you can injure the pancreas to the point where it stops making insulin. Also, there can be pancreatitis, which is just it's a disease that causes inflammation, and it could be infection, but it's not always infection. Bad pancreatitis can be caused by gallstones that you don't take care of. So if anybody's running around here with gallstones, don't take it lightly, because that gallstone gets in the common bile duct, it can cause pancreatitis, and then that can actually leave you diabetic after that. Let's go on to type 2 diabetes. Type 2 diabetes is a problem in the way that the body allows sugar to move into the cell and be used as fuel as well. So type 2 diabetes is typically a 2-part problem. One part is called insulin resistance. And what that means is that even though there's insulin around the tissues are not very responsive to it. So a lot less sugar gets into the cells than what we think it would, and when that sugar gets backed up in the blood and you test the blood, you get high blood sugars. The other piece is that over time, lots of times there is some insulin that's being produced, but there is inadequate insulin that's being produced. So that could just be a factor of age, or it could be your pancreas actually getting kind of tired because there's so much insulin resistance that it can't ever pump out enough insulin to get all of that blood sugar into your cells. Type 2 diabetes typically covers about 90% of all of the people who are diabetic. Type 2 diabetes, typically, we called it before late onset or adult onset because it used to happen in people 35 or older. You never saw it in anybody less than 35. But the rise of obesity in children has made it a lot more common in younger kids. So sometimes we now even have young teenagers that have type 2 diabetes specifically related to obesity. This type of diabetes typically runs in families. So you'll see grandma and grandpa are diabetic, and then eventually parents become diabetic, and then as the kiddos grow up, they become diabetic, and a lot of times it's because of the types of social and eating patterns that we develop just as being part of the plan, right? All right. Gestational diabetes. Gestational diabetes happens when a woman who has never had diabetes suddenly has high blood sugars during pregnancy, or who gain a ton of weight during pregnancy will be more likely to develop gestational diabetes. So sadly, even if the gestational diabetes resolves after the baby is born, that is typically a precursor for type 2 diabetes later in life. And also, kind of along the same line, even for people who didn't get diagnosed with gestational diabetes, for people who have babies greater than 10 pounds, they will there's a very high statistical probability that they will also develop type 2 diabetes later in life. Those babies are big because they're getting lots of sugar, and they can go ahead and put it right in their cells, and they grow like weeds in there. So diabetes can be a big deal. So there can be immediate life-threatening complications from not managing diabetes, no matter what kind of diabetes you have. So in type 1 diabetes, because there is no insulin that's being made by the pancreas, if you're not getting enough insulin or you're not taking insulin, and with kiddos, this happens a lot because they didn't know they were diabetic. At some point, we have to be diagnosed, right? And a lot of times, kiddos with type 1 and diabetes end up in the emergency department, very, very ill, and they typically present with vomiting and dehydration is the thing that their mamas or their dads bring them in with. And then we look at them and say, whoa, this kid is really, really sick. What happens is, because there's not any insulin, the blood sugar's high, but remember, there's no sugar in the cell, right? Because we didn't have the key to open the door. So those cells start burning, they start burning lipids in order to, if they can't get sugar, they'll start burning fats available to them. And when those cells burn fats, it's called ketosis. They make ketones, and the ketones make the blood sugar, the blood pH, go down dramatically, and they become very, very, we call it acidotic. There's just too much acid. Those ketones act as acid in the blood. And their kidneys try like crazy to compensate for that, and they cannot, and then you get these kids and they're breathing really fast and really deep. Even though their oxygen levels are fine, and that's their body trying to compensate because there's too much acid in the blood. That can lead to shock. So those kiddos can end up in the ICU on an insulin IV infusion, sometimes even requiring ventilatory support because they're in such a level of shock. Okay? Type 2 diabetes also has life-threatening emergencies. The diabetic ketoacidosis of type 1 can develop over hours to days. The life-threatening emergency for a type 2 diabetic typically develops over weeks. Type 2 diabetics who either are undiagnosed or who don't take their medication get blood sugars that are much, much, much higher than a type 1 diabetic before they get into trouble. But the trouble with it is the sugar running around in the blood acts as an osmotic agent. So before you accuse me of getting all scientific on you, who's ever boiled a frankfurter in a little pan of water to warm it up to make lunch? What happens to that thing? It swells up, right? Like it gets twice as big. That's because there's so much salt inside the frankfurter that it pulls water from the pan across that little skin on the frankfurter and pulls that water into the frankfurter. That's why it swells up. The exact opposite thing happens with your bloodstream with high blood sugar. High blood sugar in your bloodstream acts like the salt in the Frankfurter. What it does is it pulls the water from the tissues into the bloodstream. The bloodstream then goes by the kidneys, and the kidneys are like, hey, this is a lot of blood volume. I don't like this. I'm going to do what I was made to do. I am going to make urine. And they make urine. And they make a lot of urine. And your tissues get drier and drier, but your blood sugar goes higher and higher, and it pulls out more and more water. Eventually, with type 2 diabetes, your brain changes from a grape into a raisin. And those people will display confusion, other mental status changes. They will be exceptionally dehydrated. It can cause coma. And for those people who develop this hyperglycemic, we call it hyperosmolar, because the blood ends up being so concentrated because it loses so much water. People who develop hyperglycemic, hyperosmolar coma have about a 50% mortality rate. Yeah? So super important. So both of those, both the life-threatening emergency in type 1 and the life-threatening emergency in type 2, both are associated with profound dehydration. Now part of it is, what are some of the symptoms that we have of diabetes? Being really thirsty, right? If your blood sugar goes high, you're thirsty. And then what are you doing conversely? You run into the bathroom all the time, right? Because your kidneys are doing what they're supposed to do. So the sugar's pulling the water into the bloodstream, and you're drinking, and it's getting rid of all that. But until you control your sugar, that sense of thirst and that needing to urinate all the time is really not going to go away. Okay? So those are two life-threatening injury emergencies that we have to kind of keep in mind, right? Because if you're type 2 diabetic, I bet you anything your doctor didn't say, hey, you can have a life-threatening emergency if you don't control your sugar. What they might have told you about is, hey, make sure you eat after you take your diabetes medicines, otherwise you're going to have low blood sugar. Yes? Everybody knows about that? Not so much? Okay, so when you take diabetes medicine, whether that's something like metformin, whether you're getting one of the GLP-1s, like Ozempic, glyburide, any of them, you have to have the balance of what you take to lower your blood sugar and what you take in. So if you take your medicine and you don't eat, then your blood sugar can go lower than normal. And when your blood sugar gets low, then you're going to have symptoms of that. Your brain actually typically uses up about a full 20% of the sugar that's circulating in your body because it requires so much energy, even though it's only about 2 pounds. So when your blood sugar goes low, what do you think is the first thing that has a little fit? It's your brain. Yeah. So typically what happens first is you're going to feel a little hungry, you might feel a little shaky, you might feel a little sweaty, and then after that, you could feel really hangry. You could start getting really cranky, right? And then sometimes after that is confusion, and then after that is loss of consciousness, and it is possible to die from that. People have died from insulin overdoses, either purposeful or accidental, so that can be life-threatening.
So when you talk about low sugar, how low?
Anything under 70 is considered clinically low. So although I have had lots and lots of type 2 diabetic patients who frequently run around 200 because they haven't really been dialed in quite enough yet, And when they get down to around 120, they'll be like, ooh, I feel like my blood sugar's low. And they'll want to eat. You know, that's the answer for the whole thing, is eat, get your blood sugar up. And, you know, it's one of those things where you have to be careful not to overcompensate. So what we used to do back when, I don't know, when I was a new nurse, which was a long time ago, was when you had somebody who was about ready to faint because of low blood sugar, well, we got them a glass of orange juice and put a couple packets of sugar in there and said, okay, go for it. And that solved the problem. Except the problem is, it totally overshoots. It totally overshoots. So if you're feeling like you're a little shaky and you're wondering, like, hey, maybe my blood sugar is a little on the low side, then probably the thing, if you have something with you, you could have 1 or 2 glucose tablets. Diabetics should probably carry some glucose tablets along with them. But if you're home, 4 ounces, half a cup of apple juice is typically enough to get people past that unsafe stage. And then after you get that quick carb, then you want to have something that has a little protein in it. A little protein, a little fiber, a little fat. So a couple of whole wheat crackers with a little bit of peanut butter on it. Not a whole meal of that, but a couple of that will kind of keep you high enough into your next meal. Good question. Any other questions about that?
Yeah, go ahead. So I was running really low in the middle of the night,
Yeah.
like mid-60s. And my alarm would go off. And immediately the first thing I do is eat something.
Yeah.
Okay. But I was doing the glucose tablets.
Yeah.
Didn't work. 5 minutes, 10 minutes, 20 minutes, my alarm's still going off. So then they had those little gummies, the
Yeah.
glucose gummies. So I tried that. Didn't work. So then now we're another 20 minutes in and my alarm is still going off. So I eat a cracker. Is it possible my blood sugar really wasn't that low? That maybe my sensor was off or my phone was off? Is that at all possible? Because, you know, I'm in the middle of the night. I mean, I'm not awake enough to be able to look at my phone. What am I supposed to do? Turn off an alarm? You know, by that time I'm wide awake and can't go back to sleep.
Right. Could you all hear the question? No, so the question was, for someone who wears a continuous glucose monitor on the back of their arm, this is such a great breakthrough in technology. It really is. They will alarm if the blood sugar gets low, and usually it'll make a phone alarm. Does it also vibrate? No, but it makes an alarm on the phone. So that can absolutely be life-saving. But the question was, hey, my blood sugar was low, and I took a couple of the glucose tablets, and 20 minutes later, nothing happened. So I took a couple gummies that were, we'll say glucose gummies instead of the other types of gummies that are around, right? It's a safe place. And 20 minutes after that, that didn't help either. So then she had a cracker, and did that change it?
No, actually, that's why I asked the question.
Yeah.
Because could it be that my sensor wasn't right?
So the question is, was the sensor off? Was the phone off? Because really, by taking in glucose, the blood sugar should have been going up. So I'm going to be super honest with that, saying, I don't know.
Okay.
Really, I think, in all honesty, you'd have to look at the manufacturers.
Well, my doctor told me I should take a finger stick
Oh,
if that should happen, because the finger stick will be more honest.
sure.
But really, 2:30 in the morning, do I have the ability to even put it in where it's supposed to go? Probably not.
Right, especially if
So-
your blood sugar's low. She said the doctor suggested that she check her blood sugar, but at 2:30 in the morning when you're completely cross-eyed and bleary-eyed and your blood sugar's low, could she even get the little lancet in there? Possibly not. So, yeah, I guess that's when you say, okay, honey, if I go into a coma, call 911. Right. But really, it should have been going up. Were you feeling better?
Well, I was becoming wide awake because I was more scared than I was anything.
Okay.
And so it got me into a habit of eating carbs before I go to bed so that didn't happen.
Okay.
and which is a bad thing to do. You know, you don't want to go into a bad habit if you don't know what's going on.
Yeah, so I think the thing is, you know, for all the teenagers and marching band that used to pass out and that kind of stuff, it's, you know, or feel like they were gonna pass out. If you're feeling better, that's probably as good of a monitor as your phone. You probably did need to reset it or like turn off the alarm or
But I
something
didn't
like
know I was
that.
feeling bad because it woke me up from a dead sleep.
A dead sleep, sure. Sure. So, and then also getting scared and getting a little panicky about it also works in your favor because when you have the fight or flight syndrome going on, it makes your blood sugar go up.
Yeah.
So all those things worked in your favor, and here you are sitting here talking to you about it, and that is my proof.
Well, how did she resolve it?
So how did you resolve it?
I haven't, except that, well, actually, my doctor lowered my insulin. And so I haven't had the problem since she's lowered the insulin.
Yeah, because I have a meter too.
What's that?
So I have one of those,
You have one of those too?
yeah.
Yeah.
What's the reading for non-diabetics? I get conflicting stories, 70 to 160 for non-diabetics.
Not 160.
What is it?
Not 160, maybe 130 after, like
See,
immediately after.
Doctor told me
a meal.
different.
After eating.
So after eating. Yeah, fasting should be 70 to 99.
70 to
70 to 99 for a non-diabetic
non-diabetic.
person fasting.
fasting.
Fasting. And then your blood sugar, no matter what you eat, should not go up above 130 after a meal.
All right, another question, sorry.
Sure.
How long is it supposed to take from when you eat something for your blood sugar to show that you've eaten?
In the hospital, if we have somebody who's hypoglycemic, we give 4 ounces of apple juice and we check 15 minutes later. And you usually are seeing a movement, at least by then. I might have to give 4 more ounces. And if it's not moving after that, then I might have to give like IV dextrose or something like that. Yeah, good question. All right, so let's talk a little bit about long-term complications of diabetes. So the long-term complications of diabetes affects so many organs. And it's mostly a result of oxidative stress. All right, nurse, what the heck is oxidative stress?
Rust.
It is
What you call it?
rust, yes. So if you can imagine, so insulin isn't working, or the tissue is not responding to the issue, so what happens? We get higher levels of glucose in our blood vessels, right? So an easy way to think about oxidative stress is imagine those glucose piles suddenly starting on fire. And what they're doing is that fire is shooting out little sparks, right? So what those little sparks are oxygen atoms. So those oxygen atoms are looking for a place to land. Oxygen was never meant to be alone. Just like Christians, we were not meant to go through this life alone. And just like Christians, if we're really lonely, sometimes we hook up with somebody we shouldn't be with. and then things don't go well. It's damaging. Sometimes it's damaging to us, sometimes it's damaging to those people around us, and worst case scenario, it can be damaging to society. Bonnie and Clyde, right? So that is oxidative stress. You get all these little free radicals, radical little oxygens running around trying to glom onto things, and sometimes they'll even steal from a perfectly good cell to find something, and they damage that cell as well. So that's how you end up with so many organs being involved. So primarily, it leads to lots of complications. So oxidative stress includes things like the heart and the blood vessels, right? Where do we have blood vessels? Just like everywhere. So one problem with diabetes is we get diabetic foot wounds, right? So we get wounds, and then we do not have good circulation down to those wounds, and if you don't have circulation, the blood has the nutrients and the oxygens that is needed to heal those tissues. If you don't have good circulation down there, you're not going to heal those tissues. Those tissues can, over time, become infected, and then that, over time, is what leads sometimes to limb loss. Okay? So it's gangrene that develops. So the problems with the blood vessels in the heart can lead to heart attacks. The same exact process can go on in the brain, leading to brain attacks, otherwise known as stroke. So it's the same exact piece. Also in the brain, you can get small vessel disease where that ultimately leads to dementia. So dementia is in the literature right now kind of being referred to as diabetes type 3. And there's no real evidence that it's a whole nother type of diabetes, but it's so prevalent as a consequence of diabetes that they're calling it diabetes 3. So Alzheimer's disease and other vascular dementia, diabetes number 3. It can also affect the blood vessels in your eye. Your retina is full of blood vessels. So if it's impacting the blood vessels in the eye, it's going to, over time, impact your vision. You get diabetic retinopathy. High blood pressure also is a result of the damage in the vessels. So high blood pressure is so prevalent, it almost goes hand in hand with type 2 diabetes. Here's the problem. Lots and lots of times to control the blood pressure, physicians will prescribe a type of drug called beta blockers. Anybody heard of them before? Mm-hmm. So that's your blood pressure medicine that ends with the name Olal. Its last name is Olal. Atenolol, metoprolol, carvedilol. So I see some nods out there because a few of you have that in your medicine chest. Guess what beta blockers do? They mask the signs of hypoglycemia. So you won't get that shakiness. You won't get that sweating. You won't get that headache from hypoglycemia because your beta blockers are taking those symptoms away. It's masking those symptoms because what happens is when your blood sugar is low, your adrenal glands are like, what's going on here? Well, the beta blockers are supposed to help modify what's happening with those adrenal glands so that your blood pressure doesn't go spiking up. So oftentimes, the first sign of hypoglycemia in somebody who is taking beta blockers is when you actually finally become confused or lose consciousness. So just something to keep in mind, sadly. Kidney disease, huge problem with diabetes. Typically, even people who do not have high blood pressure will be prescribed a type of medicine that was initially designed for blood pressure control. It's called an ACE inhibitor because it protects the kidneys. So the most common one that is kidney protective out there right now is called lisinopril. So if you're type 2 diabetic, probably you should be prescribed lisinopril to protect your kidneys. Skin conditions are also worsened by diabetes. We talked about the problems with healing for the diabetic foot wounds. It doesn't matter. If you have a wound any place and you're diabetic, you don't heal well. When your blood sugar is over 200, your white blood cells do not work the way they're supposed to. They will not be able to fight off infection. So it's super important if you have an infection to make sure that you are doing a great job controlling your blood sugar. Here's where it gets hard. When you have an infection, your body recognizes that there's a stressor out there. Stressors make your body release cortisol, which is a steroid from your adrenal glands. Guess what cortisol does? Drives up your blood sugar. So it's especially hard to control blood sugar when you have some sort of infection. So it's very, very important to not wait on that. You need to get your healthcare provider involved pretty fast on that so that one, you can get good blood sugar control, and so that you can get on the appropriate medications to get the antibiotics under control, and then both of those things will be people with high blood sugar are also more likely to develop different types of skin infections. So more likely to develop fungal infections. Fungus among us really like sugar, turns out. So whether that's a thrush on the back of your tongue, which is painful and nasty, or sorry ladies to say this during lunch, but vaginal yeast infections, those are fungal and those are no fun either, and they are much more prevalent for people who have high blood sugar. Also, that yeast that happens in skin folds. So when you're sitting, if you have a skin fold and between kind of layers of abdominal fat or under breasts, much more likely to develop yeast or fungal infections in people who have uncontrolled blood sugar. Believe it or not, high blood sugar can cause you to be hard of hearing.
What?
Thank you. I knew I could rely on somebody. I should have whispered it. So, we talked about dementia already, huge issue. Sleep apnea, obstructive sleep apnea, another problem. Highly likely because, or a contributing factor will be being overweight is a contributor to type 2 diabetes, and being overweight is also a contributor to obstructive sleep apnea, and obstructive sleep apnea is a huge contributor, huge, to high blood pressure and heart disease. So when you treat one, hopefully you're starting to chip away at all of those things. So the last thing I want to talk about before I turn it over to Craig is what I call the sick day conundrum. Lots of times when people are taking diabetic medications, whether it's pills or whether it's insulin, when you feel lousy, especially if there's something that's involved like nausea and vomiting, you're like, I cannot keep down any food. I should not take my diabetic medication because number one, I feel lousy, and number two, I don't want my blood sugar to go too low. That's not always a great idea. You can probably get away with it a little bit better if you're type 2. You cannot get away with it if you're type 1. If there's no insulin in there, whether you eat or whether you don't eat, if you don't take your insulin, you will end up with diabetic ketoacidosis. So the deal is really to work with your healthcare provider. You probably have to decrease while you're sick the medications that you're using to control your blood sugar. But you still need to have something to either make sure that the tissue is insulin sensitive enough, or if you're type 1, you have to have some insulin. So often people with type 1 diabetes are treated with 2 different types of insulin. And this may also be true for type 2 diabetics who just did not have any adequate effect from the pills. You might have a long-acting insulin, which we refer to as a basal insulin, something like Lantus. What's another one? Anybody got a different brand?
Traceba, maybe?
What is it?
Traceba? Isn't that long-acting?
That might be new. It's been a little while since I've been doing inpatient. But if you have a long-acting insulin, and that's usually an insulin that you take 1 time per day.
Yeah, that's perfect.
Okay, great. For Zika?
Traceba.
Traceba. Okay. So 1 time a day insulin, and then the short-acting is to cover your meals. So if you can't eat at all, you still need to take your long-acting insulin. And then you can try a couple of teaspoons of Pedialyte every 15 minutes. This is not the time for diet soda where there's no carbs. You need to have a little bit of carb to get stuck into the cells. And a couple teaspoons of Pedialyte will possibly keep you out of the emergency department. All right, so enough of this medical mumbo jumbo. Now we want to know, like, what does the naturopath do about it? Because that's where my fascination is. So at this point, I want to introduce Craig Stellpflug. Craig is both a nutritionist as well as a traditional naturopath. And he is one of the most fascinating health nuts I've ever had the opportunity to work with.
With that emphasis on nut?
Uh-huh.
Uh-huh. She knows me. Thank you, Diane. Okay, let me get situated here. This is live, so I didn't want to take a spill. All right, 3 John 2 is our feature scripture. Beloved, I pray that all may go well with you, and that you may be in good health as it goes well with your soul. That is God's will. Anything less than that is outside of God's will. And we know the devil comes to steal, kill, and destroy. And he definitely wants to steal your joy. And having diabetes is no fun. I don't know if I don't have diabetes. And we might find out why here in a minute. So, keep that in mind. That is God's promise. I wish you would prosper and be in health, even as your soul prospers. Now, let's go to page 2. Turn the page. And I've had a saying that you've heard if you've been here before, especially the last time we talked about weight loss. And I said, if you're going to be a healthy human, you have to have a healthy diet. If you want to maintain health, you got to eat healthy foods. If you're trying to maintain health and you keep, here you are, you're 20 years old, top of your game, you're the recruit, the Navy recruit, and everything's going great, and then through the years, sedentary life, bad diet, and all of a sudden you're down here and disease shows up. Well, health is a spectrum. Health, disease. Where are you in this spectrum? If you're just one notch off of disease, you're not going to back it up by eating bad things. Healthy humans need healthy food to be healthy, and if you're behind the 8 ball and your health has been stolen, you're going to need a lot of good, healthy food, but it's so expensive. What is an organic egg, free-range egg, soy-free egg cost right now? Per dozen, 9, 10. Anybody pay $10 a dozen for
It
those?
was $7.50 for cage-free at Sprouts a couple weeks ago.
$7.50 at Sprouts.
Still a lot.
Wow. It costs you to stay healthy. It costs you to get sick. So sometimes it's a choice of where do you want to spend your money too. You cannot afford to eat bad things. And diabetes, and a lot of it, the type 2, is caused by diet. The things we eat, even diet allergens. Sometimes we're allergic to the food, and we don't even know it. There's an addictive reactive syndrome where you're addicted to wheat. Okay, so you've got some grandkids, Keith, and they get cereal for breakfast and milk, and they go, zoom, and they're right there waiting, running around, and the teacher's going, settle down, then 10 o'clock they go, meow. And they're jonesing for some more wheat, and you give them wheat, and right back up, because they have to have a snack about 10 o'clock. And it's just, it's a vicious cycle, but it's also a downhill roller coaster. Anybody, I love roller coasters. I love roller coasters, but they're all downhill. You get that little clackety clack ride to the top, and then it's downhill. It's so much fun, but diabetes is also, you don't like roller coasters? Diabetes is also a roller coaster. Or it's a tightrope. And it doesn't seem like there's any in between. You either walk on a tightrope or you're riding a roller coaster. And diet has a lot to do with that, but we need healthy food. And if you're eating diabetic food, wait, diabetic food? How about a diabetic cow? Anybody here want to eat a diabetic cow? You want to put them on the grill, and you want to, the fat in those diabetic cows is delicious. It grills up, it sizzles, it smells wonderful, it tastes almost sweet. Diabetic cows. What? We eat diabetic cows. That's what you get at your Walmart butcher shop. Because they grain feed them, right? God didn't create cows to eat grain. He created them to eat grass. But if you feed them grains, they swell up. They weigh more. I used to do, I had organic pastures, and I raised organic cows in East Texas. In order to raise cows, you got to be a grass farmer. And if I would only do this one thing, if I would feed them grain in the last 2 weeks before the sale, they were not quite, they go like 20% in weight. And that's what you're selling, is the weight on the hoof going across the scale. Because they swell up. It's inflammation. And if you feed them grains all along, sweet feed and stuff like that, they swell up. They're diabetic, they're fat, they're overweight, they're sick. But they bring a good price walking across that scale. We have to eat healthy cows if you're going to be a healthy human. If you're going to eat meat, and I kind of like meat. I'm a carnivore. So I recommend healthy meat. If you eat farm-raised fish, because fish ought to be good. Well, farm-raised fish usually has a whole bunch of stuff in it that you don't really want to eat. So wild-caught fish, definitely better. It's what you eat. If you're going to be a healthy human, you eat healthy food. Organic foods are expensive. Yes, ma'am.
I just read an article, organic food, this is where advertising is false. So you go to the store and they say this is organic fish. The only organic fish is fish that are farm raised. Because you can't follow a fish in the ocean. So when you see organic fish, that's not a concept. That just means farm raised fish. You want wild caught, like you said, or Alaskan, where you know where it's coming from.
Now here's an interesting thing. Tilapia, for the most part, is farm raised. And even the tilapia at Costco, it's farm raised. But when you look on the Costco website, they take a lake and partition it off, and these fish are raised in a lake. So I kind of like tilapia. Well, I'm going to buy Costco just because I got to know the source. So we have to be smart.
Yeah.
There it is right there. You've got to meet your cow before you eat them. Well, maybe not, but you should know your farmer. You want to know the person raising the eggs, right? Are those happy chickens? They're happy eggs. Are they grain-fed? I mean, what do chickens eat? I've had a lot of chickens on the farm. They eat bugs, they eat grass, they eat anything that wiggles or moves, and they eat stuff. And some of it is yuck, but they make these delicious eggs. And farm fresh egg. Anybody here been to Grandma and Grandpa's growing up? And they had chickens, and we call them cackleberries, and they're just delicious, and they're good for you. They're much healthier. If it's a healthy chicken, they're going to have healthy eggs. But a healthy chicken needs a healthy diet. So you gotta know your farmer, you gotta know your source, you gotta watch it, because you're on the spectrum, people. You either top of your game health, or you got disease knocking at the door, or even lower. So we want to reverse that trend and get up, come up. So gluten sensitivity increases your risk for diabetes. Hello, Paul. Hello. Glad you can make it. Gluten sensitivity. So humans can't really digest gluten. It's a very complex protein. One of the most complex proteins you come across in the bird gut is like 4 times as long as the human gut in comparison. And birds eat grains, humans not so much. And gluten that they grow in America, covered this little last week, last year? Might have been last year. And the gluten in America, they gotta get it exactly this tall, so the harvester gets all those heads, and the wheat doesn't fall over and start to rot and all. But in Europe, it's majestic wheat. And it grows at different heights, it grows different valley to valley, and it cross-pollinates, and it's just, and some people go to Europe and they can eat all the gluten they want. They come to America. So you might start by stopping the gluten or limiting the gluten. And here's a challenge for you. Be diabetic or not, stop eating gluten for 2 weeks. Just stop it, no gluten, read all your labels, know your stores, and then in 2 weeks, order a Pizza Hut pizza. And see what it does to you. Because you're gonna have 2 weeks for your body to go like, ooh, I feel so much better. And you're not gonna notice because it's incremental. And then you eat that gluten bomb. Then you're gonna know. Me, I avoid gluten. I just, it just does things to my gut. And I can handle a little, but I just don't. Like today's wraps, wonderful whole wheat, so you can handle it. I probably wouldn't have, so I just ate the guts. I just feel restricted. So gluten sensitivity, that's not allergy, that's sensitivity. And I would wager as a nutritionist, we're all sensitive to gluten. It increases the risk for diabetes, obesity, gastric cancers, brain disorders, and type 3 diabetes, which will be our topic next month. And how many days does February have? 28. This year? 28, that's exactly 4 weeks. So this is the 1st of February. I'm trying to help your memories here. So 4 weeks from now, we're going to do dementia disorders. And that type 3 diabetes, and gluten actually, gluten causes inflammation somewhere in your body. So where's your weak point? You know, I mean, some people, it shows up in their joints and they don't even know it. Some people, it shows up in their gut immediately. Some people, it's in their brain. They get a brain fog. Just eating gluten. I think I get a little brain fog just eating gluten. So,
Is there any kind of wheat or bread that you do eat?
what's that?
Is there any type of wheat or grain or bread that you do eat?
Well, I just get some good gluten-free bread. I just don't eat much bread. It's just not a big part of my life, you know. It used to be. And it's like, oh, I'm going to miss my peanut butter toast. But it's like, yeah, that's what you miss.
Gluten-free tortillas suck.
Well, there's actually almond ones at Costco. Did you know Costco's the biggest organic food dealer in the world?
I eat keto bread.
Keto bread.
From
I eat
Costco.
gluten-free bread.
Keto bread is really bad, but I eat it too. I just don't look at
There's
the
certain ones
ingredients.
that are bad, and there are certain ones that are really good.
So you need to experiment, and then you need to talk to people who have experimented. Maybe you can save a few shortcuts. So
That's how I have
the
my
best
bread.
gluten-free bread in town is at Trader Joe's. That's just my opinion. because gluten-free bread usually,
They're not bad.
it's like it used to be like a brick. But
Very dense.
experiment. I made my own gluten-free bread for a long time. But there's a direct correlation between developing diabetes and skipping breakfast. You eat like a king for breakfast. You eat like a prince for lunch, and you eat like a for supper, opera for supper. That's the way you need
No
to do
menudo,
it.
huh?
Coming after this
No
pie,
menudo.
you can break down your minerals, everything. And so this helps with your diabetes, or if you're trying to prevent it, if you're trying to prevent a lot of health problems. Eat a big breakfast. I love my breakfast. I wake up just to eat breakfast. Otherwise, I can eat other things. Simply eat breakfast. This is the chip developing diabetes by 31%. That is significant.
Say it again, please.
31%. It's in the second paragraph. 31% just by eating a big, good breakfast. And I'm not talking about pancakes and
I am.
high fructose syrup, jellies, and stuff like that. So that's in the cardio study. Cheap sugary drinks. Yee. That's causing obesity and diabetes at phenomenal rates outside of the United States. And it's still causing it here in the United States. But it's huge in the rapidly developing countries, the poor countries. So, 4 out of 5 diabetics are now living in low and middle income countries. So, you are what you eat, you get a bunch of cheap food, you're going to have health problems. So, diabetes natural intervention. This is what we came for, right? Okay? We're going to get it all in here. Cutting carbs and sugars, that's kind of a no-brainer. You know, those things you know the sugars. And sugar's habit forming. It's kind of like sugar. But you know what your body recognizes? Honey. Honey. Your body says, that's got enzymes that I can work with. That I can break down. Processed sugars, forget about it. That's horrible stuff. If it's white sugar, that's not how God made sugar. You seen raw sugar? Anybody?
Yeah.
It's not white. But we want it to be white. We want it to pour out the shaker. We want it to dissolve. We want diabetes. Get some good healthy sugar. If you're going to do any sugar at all, make sure it's healthy sugar. Make sure it's sugar cane. Yes, ma'am.
What about things like monk fruit or stevia?
Monk fruit's generally pretty good, but read your labels. Because it's usually, monk fruit is the last ingredient. Not usually, but sometimes. Always read your labels. So monk fruit's pretty good, but sweet foods are developed. It's like you give a kid a drink of Coca-Cola, an infant. Have you ever tried to give them their first sip of Coke and they go, that's nasty stuff. Why would you do that to me, Mom? And then a few weeks later, you keep giving it, and now they're going like, ooh. It's a developed taste. It's like bread for me. I haven't eaten bread or much bread, enough bread for so long, it's like, I don't miss it. But it's my old friend. Well, that's the difference between a habit and an addiction. Is I gotta have it. Oh, I gotta have my bread or I'm not gonna make it. No, skip your bread. And then cut back on it, you know. That's the difference. If you gotta have it, you can't do without it, then that's an addiction. Cutting carbs and sugar. Carbs is bread. And increasing exercise, I'm sorry, but I had to bring that up. It's the best plan for diabetes intervention. Not just prevention, but intervention. gestational diabetes. This is interesting because I've delivered a lot of babies, and I've lectured nurses, pediatric nurses, and labor delivery nurses and all. Gestational diabetes can be prevented with 300 milligrams of vitamin B6 and 1,000 milligrams of vitamin C daily. So, if you plan on getting pregnant, or you've got kids getting pregnant, or grandkids coming up, like I've finally got grandkids going to get married. So, just remember that. Taking vitamin C and vitamin E antioxidants, there's that antioxidant. We don't burn out, we rust out in America. So we need antioxidants. And that intervenes with both blood glucose and insulin concentrations while reducing the oxidative stress caused complications that Diane talked about. Yes or no?
If you take vitamin C, make sure it's the rose hip, because the synthetic will break out on you. And if you take too much rose hip, it'll go out in your urine.
Right, well, vitamin C is water soluble. Did you know there's something called liposomal C? I actually make it myself. In liposomal C, you shake the vitamin C into fat cells, and then it distributes to the body a lot longer. You can look that one up if you want. Liposomal C. But your kidneys look at it's water soluble. And like Don said, you need to read your labels too. 97% of all vitamin C is made in China with general GMO corn. Not the best thing. So read your labels. Get a good brand. Be healthy. Stay healthy. Eat healthy things. So pomegranates in their juice can lower cholesterol and help manage diabetes while even fighting prostate cancer. These tasty red seeds, I've got one in my yard, a tree. They're called arrows, and they're a good source of fiber, vitamin B, C, potassium, polyphenols, which are antioxidants. Green tea extract is awesome. Even green tea. Get a good healthy green tea. Don't just get your run-of-the-mill green tea. Get something good, something delicious. I've got one of those French presses dedicated just for tea. So you put your green tea or whatever tea leaves in, fill it up with water, you put the press on top of it, let it sit a few minutes and push it down. Man, that's good stuff. Full of antioxidants. Great stuff. Fiber. You need lots of fiber. We all need fiber. We need good pooping. We're eating, it should be coming out, and you need to pay attention to your stools. If it's nappy, if it's slimy, if it's loose, then there's a problem. So we pay attention. And if it's not right, and you know it's not right, find out what's right and what's wrong. Find out where it went wrong. So what's coming out of your body, sometimes it's a big reflection of what's going in, but it could also be a symptom of your digestive function. Maybe you're low on acid, maybe you don't eat breakfast. When you've got the most hydrochloric acid to break down all your nutrients and get all your minerals and all your antioxidants at breakfast, and then by supper time your hydrochloric acid is spent. And that's when we eat our big meal. No, don't do it. Don't do it, just don't do it, okay? We talked about that a while last time. Take your vitamin D, your sunshine vitamin D. Yeah, I moved back down here from Washington State a few years ago. We got more sun in Washington State. Right? And they say a day without sunshine is like a day outside of Seattle. She's been there. Vitamin D. We have to hide from the sun around here in the Arizona area because it'll crisp you. and then you sunburn. Well, if you're sunburning real easily, you're lacking in amino acids. You're lacking something in your diet. You should be able to get a healthy dose of sun without burning to a crisp. So PABA, PADA, is not in here, but paraaminobenzoic acid. It's great healthy hair, and you get sunshine and you don't burn. I mean, we could take our kids to the beach, we don't rub them down with PABA in a goop. We give them PABA in their diet. And then they turn back around and they go to the beach and they never burn. And, you know, might get a little tiny burn the very first time of the year, and then after that, it all kicks in, you're good. Vitamin D, take your vitamin D. So, vitamin D deficiency is shown to increase insulin resistance. So you want to be friendly with your insulin. And it also decreases your beta islet cell function pancreas thing. Now, I like, well, you can do your blood test numbers. I like to see about 60 nanograms per milliliter. That's a good one. Ask your doctor for the blood test next time. Like, I don't know what my vitamin D is. And then take your vitamin D. Get out in the sun is the best vitamin D. Supplemental use of K1 and K2. Vitamins K1 and 2 also develop thrombin. And that's good for your clotting factors. If you're having clotting problems, you're deficient in vitamin K. If you're getting those little bleeds under your skin, those little spider-looking things happening, you're probably vitamin K deficient. So it doesn't hurt, and it's just a tiny little pill. Supplemental use, okay. Benefits of milk thistle for diabetes. So after silymarin for 200 milligrams 3 times a day, dramatically improved blood sugar control. At 4 months, the average fasting blood glucose level fell by 15%. That's a good thing. That's a good thing. So this is just something you can take. It's a supplement. Blueberries. They're still not my favorite one yet, but blueberries are still, they're really getting up there. I eat blueberries here, because you can get them now. In fact, you can get them at the biggest organic seller in the world, whose name is Costco. They've got big gobs, big delicious blueberries, and Sprouts has them, or you can grow them. Well, maybe not so much here. We have blueberry bushes up in Washington. Ooh, the grandkids come over and just blueberries gone. We took them to the blueberry patch, and the rules were they could eat all they wanted, so we'd have 7 little grandkids running through the blueberry patch, and they would be putting them in their bucket and eating them out of the bucket. And they would be there for an hour, and they'd come back with an empty bucket, and blueberries all over their face. And I told the people going in, I said, hey, they're doing it, and they said, let them have it. So, all right, so here's my very favorite one. My very, 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 very favorite one. The next one right here, and we have Kit Carson over there from the Wild Wild West. He is nodding because he knows something about cinnamon. Cinnamon. Cinnamon is the best thing ever, and it doesn't matter the brand. Except you want to make sure it's a decent, you don't want one that's been sprayed with pesticides. So use your noggin, but it doesn't matter if it's Ceylon or one of the other ones. They all have the same constituent that reduces your blood sugar. I don't have diabetes, but I take 2 capsules of cinnamon with my breakfast and 2 with my lunch. Because it helps digestion and heats up your digestion. It's full of chromium, which is huge for diabetes control. Get some cinnamon. Yes, ma'am. Did you say Dr. pepper.
Cayenne pepper.
Oh, cayenne. Okay. Cayenne heats up your blood. That's wonderful. It's a good, and it'll make your blood work. It'll lower it.
Cayenne pepper.
But specifically to match insulin is cinnamon. Yes, sir, Don?
We take cinnamon and vinegar pills every day.
Awesome. Take them in the morning. Take your vinegar in the morning. If you want your acid to come up.
If you just want to do it natural, how much cinnamon would you have to have in a day?
How much what?
How much cinnamon would you have to eat a day if you just didn't want to take pills?
Oh, well, probably about a quarter teaspoon minimum.
That's not bad.
That's not too bad. But I
Put it
take
like in tea.
1,000 milligram capsules. I buy them like 600 in a bottle. So because I feed them to my mother-in-law, my
600 cinnamon pills in a bottle?
cinnamon pills, get them in a bottle, and I put them in my vitamin things, take them in the morning.
Get those at Costco?
Costco.
Oh, how much do you get those at Costco? I would. You're probably.
Oh, okay.
But I just ordered mine on Amazon, and they're here. I order so much of it that it's same day delivery because they keep the stock here. Cinnamon, 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 cinnamon. Release constipation and pain and stiffness and muscles and joints. I take 1,000 milligrams per meal, and I don't eat suppers, so sorry. But if I did, I would eat a little cinnamon. I'd take a capsule. All right, we gotta wrap this up here. Have you had your exercise today?
Yeah.
Exercise is good. Your body is a pump. Your body is a pump. Not only does it pump nutrients, it pumps insulin around. And if you're just sitting around, your body's not pumping. Your body's a pump, and every system in your body's a pump. There's pumps for the pumps in your body. We'll cover that sometime, but not today. And then diabetic wound healing. You need lots of arginine and choline. These things are found in eggs. Healthy eggs. Did I mention healthy eggs? We want to eat healthy eggs. If you eat sick eggs, what's going to happen to you? If you eat sick beef, what's going to happen to you?
5 minutes fast.
Now the clock's 5 minutes fast. All right, so Diane talked a lot about the diabetic wounds, and it's about the circulation. Well, cinnamon will get your circulation going, and as somebody so lovingly pointed out, so will cayenne, but not Dr. Pepper. That would cause me to pass out. But it's essential to closing your wounds, arginine and choline, found in eggs. And if you've got better circulation, or if you want to avoid the blood clotting, again, we want to go back to that vitamin K. It really wouldn't hurt you to take vitamin K, but you also want to kind of monitor things. If you're on a blood thinner, you need to start your vitamin K, but then make sure you check your blood factors. If you're going to start taking cinnamon and you're on insulin, you need to monitor. Don't be afraid to stick your finger. Right? Is that how anybody here has a finger sticker machine? I don't even use that little clicker thing. And I check my blood sugar. And I don't know why, because it's always good, but if you're on any kind of diabetes protocols, especially medical protocols, watch your blood sugar on cinnamon. It will affect it. It works synergistically with whatever insulin you do have. Even if you're type 1 and you're just barely producing anything, it could double the effect of what you're producing.
I'm gonna go buy some cinnamon taps today.
What's that?
I'm gonna go buy some cinnamon taps
Oh,
today.
yeah. Well, Amazon has them in box, and as long as you order $25, not a plug for Amazon, but yeah, get it. And then watch your blood, especially if you're diabetic. Okay, anybody here want to admit to being diabetic?
Do they want to admit to it?
What's that?
Did you say, do they want to admit to it?
Anybody want to admit to it? Yeah, raise your hand. Got a lot of diabetics here. Yeah, and some of y'all aren't admitting, but that's okay.
I used to be diabetic.
Then you start taking cinnamon.
Yeah.
Like, for real. How long you been taking cinnamon?
My first wife and daughter.
Let's see, I think about a year now.
Yeah, how did you find out about it?
I read about it.
Didn't come from me. There you have it, folks. All right, so my special neighbor, his name is Myrtle. I want him to pass out these diet recommendations. This is from one of my websites. Right here, there's 6 in each quiz. They're just throwing them up in the air at the tables and let them fight for them. And study these and go through them. These are diet recommendations for diabetes control. All right, and what I'm going to do is we always have to have our caveats. I want to bring our nurse back up here, and she will talk about the caveats. All right?
Caveat's pretty short and sweet. Craig and I come out here because it's really on our heart to try to offer anything to you that may help you be more involved and hold on to your health and retain your health. But it turns out that sometimes the naturopathic supplements do not play nicely with medications that are prescribed by physicians. For instance, vitamin K and warfarin or Coumadin do not belong in the same mouth. They do not. So the whole way that warfarin works is it tricks the liver into not using vitamin K to make clots. That's the whole way it works. So you don't want to start taking a lot of vitamin K if you're taking warfarin. That's just one example. So if you are under the care of a medical physician, please don't leave that practitioner out of the conversation. If you want to try something new, great. But make sure to include that person so that you don't inadvertently hurt yourself, because that would hurt us deeply. Okay? So that's my caveat. Be safe. We want you to be healthy and enjoy. Have a great rest of your Saturday. We're going to stop, so we stop on time, but Craig and I are going to stay around for a little bit. So if you have some questions about the medical stuff or the pathophysiology of diabetes or your medication, come see me. If you have questions about supplements and specific dietary plans that Craig talked about, come see Craig. If you want to bounce off both of us like a pinball, we'd love it. All right, have a great rest of your day.
Pastor Sean, would you stand up and close us in prayer?
Yeah. Lord, first of all, we just thank you for, first the gift of life, but you've made us in such a way that there's so many just amazing things. But we thank you for the wisdom that's been given to help us along the way, to keep our bodies safe and healthy, that we would be stewards of our body, that knowing that this is a temple that we cherish because of the relationship we have with you, but let us glorify you in how we pursue even our health. And so we praise you and thank you for this time and for the information we've been given. So in Jesus' name, amen.
Thank you, Sean.
Yeah.
It's good to see you.
Yeah, it's hard to, just, yeah. self-control, right? I mean,